to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about Fear Her, written by Matthew Grahams and directed by Euro Lynn. This story, when it was released back in 2006, was heavily criticised during the time. In fact, during a Doctor Who poll in the Doctor Who official magazine, this story came absolute last in the revival series, both in a poll around about the time to celebrate I think it was the 500th episode of Doctor Who ever, and also in 2013 for the 50th anniversary, which makes this story less popular than Love and Monsters, the most famously bad story in the revived series. A story I would like to add aired literally a week before. But unlike Love and Monsters, where there seems to be a sort of cult around it, where a lot of people enjoy it for its silliness and its ridiculousness, and it's so bad it's good quality, this story seems to get a lot of hate, mainly for being boring, uninteresting, it has a really bad juxtaposition of kid-friendly and some really adult content. But the main issue around it is just kind of forgettable, which is probably why a lot of people who are watching this probably won't even remember this story. It's really strange. I'd also like to point out that despite being one of the most popular series of the revived era, Series 2 has given us three of the most unpopular, unliked stories of the entire show's history. That is a pretty big deal. And the fact this season is still beloved by fans just is a testimony to how great the good episodes are. Now, before I actually get into the story itself, I just want to state that I don't hold this story against itself. This story was working on a very, very tight schedule. For those of you who don't know, this slot in the series was actually supposed to be by a story written by Stephen Fry, but he cancelled literally on Russell T Davies at the very, very last minute. This story, Matthew Grahams had to write this story a week before filming started. That is just absolutely mental. No wonder they struggled to get everything done and film this. No wonder there's a lot of issues that a lot of people have with this story. But does it deserve the hate? That's what we're asking ourselves. Is it as bad as people make it out to be? Does it deserve to be forgotten? Are there some interesting qualities about this serial? Let's find out when we talk about the narrative of Fear Her. So the story starts in the distant future of 2012. They've arrived here to go and watch the Olympic Games, and for some reason, for Doctor Who canon, the Olympics, the 2012 Olympics, is for some reason a gravitas for stories. Stories written before and after this have featured heavily the 2012 Olympic Games. I don't know why. Maybe because it was in London. But it's a very strange concept that Doctor Who just gravitates towards that particular era. It's really strange. But anyway, they've arrived on a small little roadside in which the flame is going to go past. Right off the bat, we get a really great gag where the TARDIS lands in the wrong direction. It's just a small little moment which the Doctor opens the door and the door is facing the wrong side, only for him to dematerialize and then faces it back forward. That is just such a clever joke, and sadly that would be the only good joke in the story. But it's a very memorable one. Like if anybody remembers this story, it's for that little moment. But yeah, so it's to hitting off the story in the right beat. Although we do get some reference to some X Factor star still being around in 2012, which never happened. In fact, the person that they stated is on tour. It was actually an actor at the time, but it was made before 2012. They weren't knowledgeable in those things, but it is kind of funny looking back. And the story is really centered around the Doctor and Rose investigating 3 missing children that have been in this village. It appears that they just sort of vanish. In fact, we get a scene, I think it's the pre-credit scene, in which an old woman warns these children to get off the street, and only for the father to argue, and only for right in front of their eyes, one of the children to just completely vanish, as another girl by the name of Chloe Webber has been watching this and draws one of the characters, only for the character she draws to be the kid that has been disappeared, and for her drawings to come to life. So that is basically the setup of the story. Right off the bat, the Doctor and Rose take up the mantles of investigators in a sense. They use the psychic paper to state that they are sort of coppers investigating this situation, and they're going to try and help. And probably the biggest issue with this story is its pacing and its characters. So let's go to the characters. Doctor and Rose in this story are really weak. It seems like Matthew Graham's is writing the Doctor as what you expect the Doctor to say. He has that bumbling dialogue. He has that he rambles on about how he likes those little cakes that people have during Olympic times and stuff, with those little ball things that you eat with the cream, the little cupcakes, and that kind of dialogue really doesn't work for me when it comes to the 10th Doctor and Rose, something which I've stated in a few episodes of the vlog series starring these two. This kind of dialogue really doesn't suit these characters. It makes them feel really bland and really... it just doesn't click. It just feels like template writing. Something which is supposed to be there for waiting for better dialogue to be written for them. Again, I don't want to say it's Matthew Graham's fault. This is something that has been an issue with a few of the 10th Doctor stories so far. So it could be Russell T Davies pushing the whole, these characters just think the world of each other, and so their dialogue is mainly about them just getting along, if that makes sense. Rose is a afterthought in this story, with only really the ending right at the end. She all of a sudden become a very prominent character in the story in terms of her plot line. We do get some really nice little moments with them. A great example is after they've been attacked by a drawing monster, does the Doctor and Rose talk about children? And Rose basically states that, she hates children. Kids are just spoiled sports. I was never like that as a kid. I had loads of cousins. And then she states to the Doctor, you've never had kids. To which the Doctor replies with, I was a father once. To which Rose is just like, wait, what? Now, obviously, as a Doctor Who fan and a complete and utter nerd, I knew this fact because of Susan, who is the Doctor's granddaughter, which logically means that the Doctor has also had a kid, unless you go by the virgin New Adventures novels where Time Lords are not born, they're loomed, and that's a whole completely different discussion. But for the temperament of this story, the Doctor has been a father. That is a nice little moment, and it's a nice little fan moment, but it never goes anywhere. It's just, wait, what? Oh, okay. I mean, a great use of this in a plot would have been like Rose is like, it's another thing that Rose is seeing. It's like the Doctor just mentions it, like with Sarah Jane earlier in the series. You know, the Doctor has had many lives before Rose Tyler, and she's only now learning and picking up this, and she's feeling a lot less like a like this complete item that she thought her and the Doctor were. That would have been a nice, interesting place to go with this plot line. But no, instead, it gets brought up and is completely forgotten about. And I guess that wouldn't have been so bad if it wasn't for the fact that our stories have kind of keep bringing this up, but Rose never gets confrontational about that aspect. I mean, she does with the Sarah Jane part, but it comes off more arrogant. But here, this is like this is a big deal. He was a father at one point. What happened to the kid from her perspective? Like, what? No, she doesn't even question it. That's really weird. And unlike Rose that we've seen in previous stories, right after this, she goes back to her bumbling self. Then the Doctor and Rose later on discover that the missing children are linked to a particular child, a child that's been looking throughout the window, and her mother seems to be scared of her during a little confrontation on the road in which all of the parents have been arguing with each other. There's also somebody who works for the council, I can't remember his name, but none of these parents get anything sort of interesting to do, and a lot of their dialogue comes off really convenient in a sense. There's an old woman who seems to realise that something odd is happening in this street, and she's trying to tell the families, and obviously they don't believe her. However, to get there's a little bit of contrivancy. For example, the father who we saw at the earlier in the pre-credit scene in which he sees the child disappear in front of his eyes, all of a sudden believes that this is just, well, I say all of a sudden, but he still is under the impression that it's just kids running away from home, not sounding any bit concerned by the fact that kids are disappearing, and 3 of them have, all at different times, which should raise suspicions. But the fact that he's seen one disappear right in front of his eyes, he doesn't like question it. It's really, I don't know, it's just really strange. But none of the parents are really that interesting. None of them have anything to do or say except for, obviously, the mother of Chloe Webber. Now, let's talk about the emotions and the capability of this story. Let's start off with some good things I like. The directing by Euro Lynn gives this story a semi-artificial look. The streets seem to be too perfect. The streets seem to feel too clean and also feel a little bit too empty. This gives this story a atmosphere of something odd, something strange, something, I want to say artificial, as if everybody is being watched on a television screen within the context of the story, which actually fits the story very well, as the majority of the plot is through the eyes of a child. And when we get into what is actually happening, the theme and context is about children and their loneliness and how they are bonded together by loneliness, you know, which is a great deal. But let's go into the more controversial aspects of this story, and that is its tone. For you see, when Matthew Graham's was writing this story, he was asked to write a child-friendly story, something light-hearted and upbeat for the younger kids before tackling into the finale of the series, in the next 2 episodes. So he wrote an episode which, for the most part, feels like it could have easily fitted on the CBBC. Something which could have easily fitted with the Sarah Jane Adventures. There's a family on a small road, very similar to Sarah Jane, despite Sarah Jane not being made yet. The context, the landscape of the story in terms of how it looks and how it feels very a precursor to the Sarah Jane Adventures. And in that sense, it does a good job in looking like that. But when we get into the needy and gritty of the story, then we get some really strange and bizarre circumstances. You see, it turns out that Chloe Webber, which I need to state for the record, a lot of people criticise this story for her acting. Of course, you can't put too much strain on kid actors. I think for a kid actress, she does the best that she could and the best material. I mean, I think the material she had to work with was very limited. Really, what can you do with that role apart from act grumpy and whisper when you're in your possessive mode? But yeah, I don't blame her for this, and I think she did the best she could, but it's still not a great performance. But anyway, the story has a nice little context of her being connected with a symbiotic creature that has travelled inside her. This creature which is used to being lived with thousands upon thousands of family members and can create artificial imaginary worlds and can transport people in and out of them like a status thing. This takes the form in Chloe Webber by her drawings. She draws people and then they come into life inside her drawings, waiting to be released. And that is what's happening. She is being kidnapping the children from there. And the idea is that they are lonely. Both the creature and Chloe Webber are extremely lonely individuals. But why is Chloe lonely? The story doesn't go really much into detail to... Actually does, what am I on about? But this is where we get into the more darkest aspects of the story. It turns out, we learn through dialogue and context that her father, the mother's previous partner, was a very abusive man, especially when he was drunk. And Chloe Webber had the full impact of his abusiveness. And when he passed away and she had haunting dreams about him, she wants to talk to her mother about it, only for the mother to not really listen because she doesn't want to think about it. She doesn't want to really put in her mind that that she kind of let this abusive relationship happen. And having this child-friendly feeling to the story, and then all of a sudden going through a dark and a very serious subject matter, is really thing. I wouldn't say there's a whiplash moment, but the story goes at such a slow pace. Mind you, when the Doctor and Rose actually interact with Chloe Webber, we are then halfway through the story. This is only 1 episode long, but still feels like an absolute drag. The Doctor, in terms of pacing, this story is just horrible, just absolutely the worst. The Doctor and Rose, in a quick succession, go from interested in the Olympics, going into discovering about the missing children, and then setting up that they are investigators. Like, that happens in quick succession right at the early of the story. Then for like half of the adventure, the Doctor and Rose are slowly investigating. We get some little banters and stuff, but the story is clearly struggling to find anything interesting to do with this plot. We could have used this time to establish the characters a bit more and have some much more better dynamics, but no, we have a companion TARDIS crew, a companion Doctor crew, who are just too infatuated with each other, but nothing really interesting in terms of their dialogue when nothing is confronting them to really apply to this story. And the families that this story is affected seem very disinterested by the fact that 3 children are missing. We don't actually see what the missing children's impact are on the families. We kind of see it in a community sense. Like you see like them arguing about like who should be doing what and why, but you never see like anyone like suffering or in tears or doing anything really to search about the missing children. It just seems like there's, you know, the missing children is just a plot point to get to the Chloe Webber stuff, and that happens halfway through the story. Then 1/4 of the story then is about the Doctor and Chloe Webber and all that stuff, and this is where we learn about her father and stuff. So yeah, the whiplash effect, which would have usually turned out in a story like this, never really feels, because the story takes such a slow pace that you're so uninterested in Chloe Webber and her family dynamic that her having an abusive father feels a lot more like it was just there to be written like this has got to happen for the sake of the plot, rather than feeling natural to our characters and to the plot line. I will say I do really like the scene in which Rose discovers the father drawing. It turns out that Chloe Webber can not only sustain people in suspended animation in her drawings, but she can also bring people to life. She makes a scribble at one point, creating a scribble monster. And it turns out that Chloe Webber has secretly been drawing her father in her cupboard, and the father figure is coming to life. The scene in which there's like a lot of red light and Rose is absolutely terrified by this in her facial expressions. Billy Piper does a fantastic job there. It's really stunning. But why does Rose like slowly walk to him as if like she's possessed? Like the Doctor has to like close the door as she's like slowly walking in. That's just a very odd moment. And so the Doctor gets to learn about like the creature inside of it and all of that. And then we get the whole moral of the story, in a sense, in which the story is all about communication or lack of communication. The Chloe Webber couldn't communicate with her mother because of her abusive relationship with her father, and the mother doesn't want to think about it. And the creature, I believe it's called like the Arsolis or something like that, has been separated from its family and is actually kidnapping people to connect it to have a world full of people, and is drawn to Chloe Webber, as it states 100 times in Chloe Webber's body, that I love Chloe Webber, which is just such a silly line. It's silly, it's just silly. We do then get a pretty terrifying scene in which Doctor and Rose go into the TARDIS, but Chloe Webber follows them, and after they leave, she goes back into her house and she starts drawing the Doctor and the TARDIS, trapping them. Why she didn't write Rose? Plot convenience. And it's also here that we discover that the mother's a very terrible mother. Despite learning all this and her daughter's abilities, she constantly leaves her child on her own to create harm and damage throughout the rest of the of the village. I mean, there's a great moment. There's a stupid moment where Rose gets back into the house as the mother introduces herself in the living room, and Rose obviously and justifiably just goes, "I told you not to leave her. Why did you leave her upstairs where she could draw and continue this havoc that she's doing?" It's also here then that the Olympic plot then rears its head as Chloe Webber starts drawing everybody at the Olympics, and everybody at the Olympics, all of the presenters, the people in the audience, and all of the athletes suddenly disappear, becoming a massive event in the Olympics. You know, people just suddenly disappear. The Doctor learns from the drawing of the Doctor that the spaceship that the creature needs to get back needs to be found. It also needs to be sent back and get a power source. And there's this whole stupid moment where it's like, we don't know what the power source is, and it turns out the power source is hope, love, as people have so much hope for the Olympic torch, which just adds into so much stupid scenes. We get a highly comical scene of Rose working out that this piece of stone, this alien spaceship, is actually under some tarmac. So she breaks into a council van and breaks through the road whilst one of the characters is constantly shouting, "Council this, council that. I'm going to report you to the council." Rose finds what she's looking for and throws it into the flame of the Olympic torch as the bear runner comes out. As somehow then the creature discovers this and is like, "Right, I can go home now. Sorry, Chloe Webber. I'll always love you, but I'm going to disappear now." And she leaves Chloe's body to go into the flame and get transported, and everybody gets transported back into the real world. We then get a scene which personally I find is absolutely hilarious, as the torchbearer, the runner at the Olympics, suddenly collapses as everybody is in shock and in awe, as the reporter on the news broadcast is like, "Oh no, hope is dead. The Olympic flame, it's gone. There's no more hope." There's so much disappointment as the Doctor then comes up and brings up the torch and runs as everybody cheers him on, and the presenter is like, "Oh no, some stranger's come along. Nobody's stopping him. It turns out that the Olympic torch, the Olympic pride, is going to continue after all." Did the Doctor just leave that guy to die? That guy, he collapsed onto the floor. The Doctor didn't even check like his pulse or anything. He could be dead for all we know. And the Doctor just picks up the torch, runs off. Nobody gives a shit about that guy. Did he die? Did he have a heart attack? What happened to him? That is just hilarious. They make a description that he was previously hit by an electric bolt, which we don't actually see in the story, which is just a really bizarre detail. I don't know if it's actually supposed to be a reference to the moment where where the alien ship landed in the flame, but that was just like the flame bursting up as he like backs off. It wasn't like he got hit by electricity as is described. But yeah, the Doctor just let him, a poorly injured man, die in. God fucking fear. As the Doctor becomes the final bearer of the torch and puts it into the flame as the alien ship travels up, we then get a moment of the Doctor and Rose reuniting, and a small little setup for the next story in which Rose is like Nothing can last forever, except for us. We'll be together forever, won't we, Doctor? As the Doctor looks up and just proclaims that there is a storm coming. Something is arriving. Something soon is going to be blazing. I absolutely love this scene because, in context, it does kind of feel like the Doctor's just blanking Rose out, and it does come off, if you think about it, especially knowing now, well, what happens in the next story and stuff, as if, like, the Doctor, like, it could be interpreted as the Doctor's just really sick of Rose, and this is kind of like him subtly going, right, it's time for you to leave. Obviously, that wasn't the context of what the writers were thinking. It's just my interpretation in a more humorous sense. I don't saying it actually is that is the actual context of the story, but the fact that Rose is just like, Doctor, we're going to be together. We're going to be together, all right, aren't we? We're going to last for like years and years and years. And the Doctor's just like, I feel like something bad's going to happen. So unless the Doctor is generally like, he can see like his own personal future, or he senses stuff like that, it does come off like the Doctor's going, right, I'm getting sick of you. I think I'm going to I think I'm going to get rid of you the next possibility I can. So that's Fear Her. Overall, it is a very weak story. It's by no means the worst story, however. It's mainly forgettable, and the story really doesn't know what to do with itself until the very end, where it starts talking about the family dynamic. The main issue, I think, with this story is its pacing. The story, shall I say, only really takes up half of the episode, and that's mainly the second half, as the first half is literally just our characters wandering about until the situation arises that they can connect with the story. And I can understand why this is a very weak entry for a lot of people. That's like the main issue with the story. There's nothing really to grab onto. There's nothing really there to say about it. I like that it does try to tackle some much more harder storylines with the whole abusive father plot, although I think it was misjudged here and comes off a little bit insensitive to the very serious topic that it's trying to tell, and kind of puts the blame more on the mother for letting this happen, rather than making us feel like the guilt and how that the abusive father is kind of responsible and tearing up this family, in a sense, if that makes any adjustment. But in terms of the way the story feels, the atmosphere of the story, me personally, it feels like a backdrop, a template for both the Sarah Jane adventures and Torchwood, because it's got that darker elements which just seem to be massively misrepresenting of the subject matter, something which I think Torchwood, for better or for worse, does do in its some weaker episodes, and the whole much more child-friendly, the humorous dialogue, the idea of a kids on a small roadside feels very much like Sarah Jane. So I don't know what that means. Just something that just popped in my head while I was watching this. But yeah, Fear Her, a very weak entry in the series, and the fact that this series has had 3 of the weakest stories in the whole series, including the classic series. Apart from really, I think with Idiot's Lantern and Fear Her, they're mainly uninteresting, very dull plots. Unlike Love and Monsters, which is a generally bad story with a lot of bad written stuff about it, but then you can actually take the mick and have a laugh at that story. So, to say that these three stories, some of the worst that Doctor Who has to offer, comes from the same series, and it's David Tennant's first, doesn't leave a good impression in the mouth. But there you go, that's Fear Her. But can this series redeem itself? Can the finale put some interest back into the series after two very big misses? Well, join me next time where we will say goodbye to a dear friend and the moment that we've all been waiting for as Doctor Who nerds, as two of the Doctor's greatest enemies finally interact with one another. So join me next time for the Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!